Hi there, welcome to this Raw News Hustings. Over the course of this election week here at Raw, we're interviewing all of the candidates for all of the different full-time officer positions, and today, as you can see on screen, we're talking to those running to be the next welfare and campaigns officer. If at any point throughout the next half an hour or so you'd like to have your say, get involved, or maybe ask a question to our candidates, then comment below on Facebook or YouTube or on Twitter, reply to the stream, and we can pose those questions to our panel. Just make sure you're not addressing your question to one particular person and actually to all of the candidates for the position. So that's the plan, and if you've missed any of the other hustings from Raw News over the course of the week, do check out those on the Raw 12:51am Facebook page and YouTube feed. Voting is open for the positions. It closes on Friday at 7 p.m. and you can vote, as you can see on screen, at warwicksu.com/vote. We, of course, encourage you to make an informed choice. Let's find out how voting works with this clip, which explains all.
Polls are opening soon. This video covers how voting works in SU elections and making your vote count. First, go to the Warwick SU website and log in using your student ID. Hover over the Student Voice tab and select the Elections option. Scroll down to the Spring Elections section, and when polls open, click Vote Now. Voting uses the Single Transferable Vote System, or STV. When voting, you rank your favourite candidate as 1, but also rank the other candidates, so that if your first choice candidate isn't selected, your vote can be transferred to your second, third, and so on. And that's how to vote. Good luck.
There we are. That's how to vote if you were unsure before that. warwicksu.com/vote. That's where you need to go to. So we're talking to the Welfare and Campaigns Officer candidates, and actually, in fact, there's just 2 candidates running for this position now, or certainly 2 candidates that we could get a hold of today. We'll introduce them both now, one by one, and then we'll have a discussion over some key policy areas. So I'm going to go by how it comes up on my screen, and that shows Sebastian West coming up first. Hi Seb, great to see you today. Just introduce yourself to us if you would, sort of what you study, what year you're in, and why you want to be the next Welfare and Campaigns Officer.
Okay, so my name's Sebastian West, pronouns are he, him. I'm a law student, 3rd year. You also might know me from Cocktail Society. I'm the Social Secretary for Cocktail Society. I have been for 2 years now. The reason why I'm running, well, I've been on the Welfare Committee this year. I've actually been the chair of the Welfare Committee. So I've really been able to see the different welfare issues that I've noticed around campus, and working so closely with Izzy, meeting her every single week, I've sort of managed to formulate a plan of how I'd want to make welfare better for all students at Warwick.
Okay, thanks so much. We'll be back with you in a moment. That's Sebastian West, and the other candidate that we've got with us today is Charlton Sayer. Hi Charlton, great to see you. If you'd like to do the same and introduce yourself.
Right. Hello, so I'm Charlton Sayer. I'm a 3rd year history and politics student. I'm also arts faculty rep and the treasurer of Warwick Enable. And I'm running because the SU has massively let students down and has ignored students' well-being. If you want to see the proof, we have a loneliness and a mental health epidemic here at Warwick. What's the SU done? Just Teams calls, and that's about it. There's been more and more talk of lobbying, of campaigns, but we've not seen much progress. The safety net's gone, Warwick accommodation's gone, eating at Warwick's gone. There's nothing been done about rents for students off campus. The SU couldn't have represented students' views, however, if it tried. This is clearest over in-person teaching, where they're completely caught out to all student votes ago. So I want to be something rare, which is an SU officer who actually represents the views of students and who'll stand up for them at every opportunity.
Okay, thanks so much. We'll bring back in Sebastian West now. So here we all are, and the plan is to work our way through some key policy areas which people are concerned about, which is affecting the way people vote. On each issue, you'll have an opportunity to speak freely for a moment or so, and then we'll engage in some debate, and you can speak to each other and ask each other questions where needs be. So let's begin quite broadly and ask for your top priorities. I know there some of you have pointed out perhaps some of the issues you'd like to solve and some of your priorities, but we'll go into a bit more detail here. So, Charlton, I'm going to come to you first. Tell me, what are your top priorities running for the role of Welfare and Campaigns Officer?
So I think the biggest is reopening Warwick, so returning to in-person teaching, keeping in-person teaching, but also reopening SU venues like T-Bar, Curiosity, the Duck, and keeping them open, making sure the university doesn't use COVID as an opportunity to cut corners next year. And this is because social health, I think, is the best way of improving welfare. So, letting people see their friends and make new friends, that's the best way of improving mental health for the most amount of people. But I also want to radically reform wellbeing services, make it easier to get extensions, campaign against exploitative landlords, and much more.
Okay, and Sebastian, to you, do you want to tell us your top priorities?
So there's three big ones that I mention a lot. First of all, clear and precise COVID-19 policy, which would mean we're going to have a lot of first years and second years who are going to be coming back to university having to do in-person exams when they've never done it before. So I want to make sure there's frameworks in place to ease any anxiety they may have. We're going to have a lot of students that are going to be really badly financially hit by the pandemic. I want to make sure that there are provisions in place to help them, whether that's finding jobs for them or allocating grants. And obviously there's going to be a lot of students struggling with mental health. So I want to diversify the amount of outlets we have for access to wellbeing to make sure that it's catering to all students from all backgrounds and not just certain ones. There's also, I want to talk to liberation communities, especially this year. I feel like their voices have been ignored, and I want to make sure that I'm engaging with them at any time. With any decision that I want to make, I want to make sure that I'm talking to students from all backgrounds.
Okay, so there we are, the top priorities from both of you. Obviously, there's only two of you, so we're not going to be engaging in debate amongst many people. But if you'd like to come in at any point, just sort of nod to me or raise your hand or signal. Or perhaps at this stage you might want to ask the other candidate a question. I'll give you a moment now if either of you would like to come back in on top priorities. Okay, what we'll do is we'll move on to some policy issues then, and perhaps we'll engage on debate on those areas. Now, I want to go to something that Sebastian touched on there, which is obviously the effects of the pandemic on students, on their mental health, and on their welfare. Really, fundamentally, it's something that's affected everybody, but there's been a huge amount of uncertainty around students, and I think that uncertainty still remains about when the plan is to go back to campus. So Sebastian, we'll come to you first on this, and I know you've just touched on it, but I want to delve into the policy area a bit more here. COVID has affected people so much. How will you ensure that people won't be suffering as a result of the pandemic?
So again, one of the main policies I want to bring in that I talk about is I want to have a welfare, an appointed welfare officer in every single department across campus. There are huge disparities between access to welfare across different departments. I know that STEM, for example, have terrible access to welfare aid. I just came out of a welfare meeting now where sociology students had no idea who to go to for welfare in their department. So I think if we have a clear person in every single department whose role is specifically to help with the welfare related to obviously coronavirus issues, that's going to go a long way for students knowing where they can go, who they can talk to, and getting help from there. So that would be one of the things that I would put in place.
Charlton, I wonder if you've got similar views on mitigating the effects of COVID, or perhaps you want to do it slightly differently.
Yeah, so obviously COVID's everything this year, and it will be next year as well. My top priorities are pretty similar to how to deal with the impacts of COVID. Student welfare is more than just what goes on in committees, and I will, if I was elected, vigorously hold the university account and call them out if they ever thought about cutting services, whether that's in-person teaching or anything on campus at all. And so I'll go back to my other point about how we need to keep Warwick open. We need to open Warwick up and keep Warwick open.
I just want to bring you in on this topic, Sebastian, of keeping Warwick open. In terms of the return to campus, in your view, and obviously this all depends on government guidance, but in your view, when should this happen? Should we be looking to get in-person teaching back in term 3 of this year, or perhaps term 1 of next?
So I didn't talk about coming back to on-campus much in my manifesto because I sort of leave that to the government. I mean, even if I get elected, there's not much that I can do to change the government guidelines. I would want in-person teaching as quick as possible, as long as it is obviously safe. I don't want to push it, have students come back for us to go back into another lockdown. No one wants another lockdown at all. So I would, of course, want in-person teaching as quick as possible, but keeping with government guidelines and staying safe about it.
So the reason I asked that question and why I think it's an issue within the Students' Union is because we saw this year the government saying it's safe to go back into classrooms, and the Students' Union, or certainly parts of the Students' Union team, saying actually it's not safe. So it seems to me, Sebastian, that you'd like to go in line with the government guidance there. Charlton, do you want to come back in here?
Yeah, so unless the SU radically changes, I wouldn't trust it to make more incredibly damaging decisions. This is the same SU now which went against in-person teaching, although now we know it was entirely safe. This virus won't disappear after Easter, despite what the government says or despite what anyone says. And so we need to fight as hard as possible to reopen as early as possible, but also to keep it open after June or April, whatever.
And so many of us had in-person teaching before Christmas and not having it now. I asked a question to both of you. Was in-person teaching before Christmas safe? Charlton?
Yes.
Sebastian?
There's been mixed experiences. I remember the first time I went into a class, they put us in a class where there was no ventilation because they hadn't planned it out, which I was a bit surprised about because they had all the summer to do it. Then it sort of ironed itself out, and it did become relatively safe. At least I felt safe on campus in classes. Yeah.
Okay, so both of you vaguely on the sort of the same line there. The in-person teaching is safe, and so I suppose in that vein we should be hoping to do that as soon as possible. And I think you both agree there. Okay, let's move on to another issue here, which is wellbeing services on campus. Of course, run by the university, but the Students' Union often has criticisms of this. It doesn't work well enough, the waiting lists are too long, that the services aren't as good as they should be. How will you, as Welfare and Campaigns Officer, lobby to make the wellbeing services at Warwick better? Charlton, let's come to you first.
So there's a few kind of basic problems with wellbeing services that I can see. Appointment times are ridiculous. You can get one in a fortnight if you're lucky. Communicating with them is really difficult. If you do need treatment or adjustment or anything, you need a doctor's note of evidence, which itself is £20. So I think these are problems that we can look at solving. I kind of have quite basic, kind of straightforward solutions, I think. But I think also when I say about radically changing wellbeing services, I think we need to look at our kind of relationship to them. I think we need to look for a kind of lobby, which I think will be quite easy because I think it's quite a good idea, for a more continual relationship, regular contact from the services rather than making students reach out to them, which is actually often the hardest step.
Okay, you say there are some sort of simple solutions and ways to fix this. Tell me what those are.
Well, hiring more therapists. Changing the communications. So, as I said, a continual relationship would make this easier. And I think when we come out of COVID, especially as people aren't furloughed, I think that this is very achievable, basically.
So, if you were to be the next Welfare and Campaigns Officer, you would be hoping for more appointments to be available and then not to be so long a wait.
Yes.
Okay. How about the idea that actually so many people over the years have stood on this campaign pledge and it hasn't really come to light?
No, I'm very aware of that. So that's why I'm saying that it's not the only change. As simple as you're right. As simple as hiring therapists is, obviously you can't always rely on it. But I do think it's a kind of straightforward solution that we should be pushing for. But that's why I'm also saying we need to change our relationship so it's more kind of accessible and easier to reach out in the first place.
Okay, and this is something that's clearly going to take time. Sebastian, let's hear your thoughts on wellbeing services now. What needs to change?
So the way that I want to go about it, and I think could work towards the solution, is diversifying the amount of outlets that we have for students to go to. At the moment, all we have is sort of a very formalised form of counselling. So maybe along that, if we created an anonymous form of counselling for students to go there, they might feel more comfortable. Nightline, for example, they're student run, they're anonymous, they're not counselling, but they're a listening service. Promoting them, working with them, making sure that students know that they exist. I don't think that there's going to be a quick and fast way of solving the mental health crisis. I think both Tiana and Izzy, the past officers, tried their best, and I think it is just going to be a continuous process of forcing the university to give funds, trying things out, creating different outlets. I don't think it's going to be a quick process at all.
You said there that the past two officers have tried their best in this position, and yes, as you signal, there's still change to be made. So my question here to you is, will your best be good enough?
Well, I would hope so. I mean, that's why I'm running. I think that I can offer my perspective on it. So yeah, I would like to think it was.
And on the issue of more anonymous, we'll come to you in a moment, Charlton. I can see you'd like to come back in here. On the issue of anonymous services, without your name being present to people, how do you propose that would work in terms of that also linking in with your academic records, so that your personal tutors and your seminar tutors and things will be able to be aware of your circumstances?
I think that would be the whole point of it. You wouldn't want anyone to know. I think people are worried the minute you get put on a list that the concerns that come with that. So I think the whole point of having the anonymous form of counselling is that that's not going to happen. It's not going to go beyond that meeting or beyond the contact there.
But surely, if your personal tutor, for example, who is responsible for your welfare at university, is able to see that you're struggling and could perhaps help you, or at least work through some mitigation policies with you, so this wouldn't affect your degree, surely that would be beneficial.
Yeah, which is why they could still go to the formalised counselling if they wanted to, or they can even reach out to the personal tutors. I'm not saying that the anonymised counselling would be the only form available. It would just be another option for those who don't want to go to the formalised counselling, but it would still be available. You can still contact your personal tutor if you want to. I'm not trying to limit it. On the opposite, I'm trying to create more outlets.
Sure. Okay. Let's bring back in Charlton Sayer. Charlton, what's your response to what you've just heard from Sebastian?
Yeah, so all this talk about wellbeing services, wellbeing services certainly are important, but if we're going to be serious about people's mental health, we have to look at what affects the most people. For better or worse, most people don't reach out, so yes, we should be making it easier to reach out to wellbeing services, but also we need to be talking about bringing back people's social health. That means bringing back university experience, bringing back in-person teaching and reopening SU venues. I think that's the most important kind of message of this campaign. That's the most effective way of improving people's mental health.
Sebastian?
I mean, I just think that's going to happen anyway. I mean, we don't get elected till August. June's the end of the government's.
That places a lot of trust in the SU. I mean, these same people that are saying this in the SU are the same that it's, opposed in-person teaching. Unless we radically change the SU, I really don't trust them not to kind of, keep things closed longer than they need to be.
I mean, I would disagree. There was an all-student vote on a motion of going on to...
Yeah, but the SU are against... The SU took the opposite view to this all-student vote to what the students actually voted for at the end by a massive number.
But was there any impact? The students voted for it, so the motion didn't go through. They had a different opinion. They acted on it, but it didn't resolve anything because students had their voice. So I don't really see where the issue is.
Charlton, I suppose you'd say the issue is inherently within the SU.
Well, yeah, I am. Yeah, exactly. Unless we completely change it, the issue is still there because the SU, even after the ASV, they didn't suddenly say, oh, fine, all in-person teaching's fine, we'll support it as much as possible. No, they still were against students' views, and I don't actually think that the ASV changed that. I still think they were opposed to them very strongly. Pretty much held the same position, despite students telling them quite strongly that they disagreed.
But they couldn't act on that. That's the whole thing. So if I was, for example, the welfare officer and I had a certain opinion and it went to an all-student vote and the all-student vote was against my opinion, I know the first thing that I would do would be disregard my opinion and follow the students, which I feel that the officers did do.
Would you be comfortable with doing that? Sorry, Charlton. Would you be comfortable with implementing a policy which goes against your personal views, Sebastian?
No, 100%. If the all-student vote and students voted for it, and if it goes against mine, no way am I going to step in the middle of it. It's not my role to do.
Being an SU officer is not about your personal views much. It's about being a representative of students. And I'd happy if students voiced an opinion, I would quite happily act on that, regardless of my own personal views, because that's what I'm there for.
Okay, so there we are talking about really we'll move from wellbeing services to a discussion all about different things as well, which is good. Let's talk about something which has affected people's welfare a lot over the past few years on campus, and this is the issue of sexual harassment, sexual assault. Much criticism in sort of public social media campaigns has been against the university and against the Students' Union itself, even over the past few months. I had all of the candidates to be president with me just some days ago, and they all said more needs to be done when it comes to making people feel safe on campus, particularly on the issue of sexual harassment. So I'd like to go into a bit of detail, if I could, with you both, on your policy areas, on your policy proposals for this area. Seb, let's come to you first. How will you ensure everyone feels safe?
So the first thing that I would do, which I really think is the bare minimum that should have been done and it's not being done, is creating a compulsory module that every student has to take when coming to Warwick on sexual harassment, educating on it. I think that would be the first thing that I would bring in place. I mean, I've been to university for 3 years now and it's not in place. That's the first thing that I would do. I would make sure that every policy that I bring is preventative rather than sort of reactionary. So we're stopping it from happening rather than sort of fixing it when it does happen, which would mean harsh, well-known and harsh punishments to people who are accused of sexual harassment and sexual violence.
Just to clarify there, well-known punishment, what do you mean by that?
So it's something that you could access, that you would see. So you know, if you breach this is a punishment that you're going to get. So you'll know what's going to happen rather than sort of vague punishments and no one really knows what will happen if you are accused.
And what's your view on this? What punishment should there be if you make someone feel unsafe on campus?
Well, obviously it would depend on the severity of the case, but it could go from anything from being forced to leave the university to taking time off. Honestly, it would depend on the specific case, but I don't see really a limit on it.
So that would also then, I suppose, if there's no limit, include someone being kicked out of the university, banned from campus?
Oh, 100%. Obviously, depending on how severe the case was, but I wouldn't be against that.
Sure. Charlton, your thoughts on this? I'll just first, what sort of punishments would you like to see? Would you go as far as banning people from campus, and then your sort of broader policies for making sure people are safe?
Yeah, absolutely. So never mind talking about punishments. I think it should be obvious, but we should take a zero tolerance policy. I think all of campus should be safe. I'm not a first year anymore. I'm a third year, and I think the best way really is probably consultation of first years about where campus needs to be safer, better lighting. I also think we need to have a better security. I think this could be done by giving them forcing them to take training on welfare and diversity, for example. But I also think actually we need to think a lot more when we talk about sexual harassment. It might be easy to forget this year with lockdown, but off campus is also a really big issue. And when clubs and pubs reopen, when they ever do, this is going to be an issue that I think actually could be more important than on campus even.
Sure. Seb, any response you've got to Charlton's thoughts there?
No, 100%. I agree that off campus is a big issue as well. Students traveling home at night, or again in nightclubs, and that would be an area that would definitely need targeting as well, not just on campus.
Charlton, do you think that the welfare of people off campus is put or has been put over the past few years as secondary to people on campus?
Definitely. I think partly it's just a symptom of how Warwick is. It's easy to focus on what's going on campus because you're kind of closest to the issues. But yeah, of people off campus, Coventry and Leamington have been ignored completely. I think really. Again, that's why I'm saying not just on well-being and sexual harassment and all that, but for example on rents and things. I do think we're campaigning against exploitative landlords. I don't think that students off campus, despite us, we make up the vast majority of students at Warwick. I don't think the SU or the university is particularly interested, really. Again, Warwick accommodation, another example.
Okay. Sure, we're going into campaigns there, and I just want to ask you one more question on welfare before I move there, and I know that they're sort of linked together. A big welfare issue on campus recently, and a big debate this week, is about people accepting the most commonly accepted definition of anti-Semitism, the IHRA definition of anti-Semitism. And I know Warwick Jewish Society have contacted candidates, and some people haven't responded, but most, I think, have said that they'd be comfortable adopting the IHRA definition of anti-Semitism. This is to you both. As candidates, is this something you support, accepting the definition? Sebastian?
I messaged the Jewish Society saying that when the motion "It's time to combat anti-Semitism" got passed and the IHRA definition got put into the SU's bylaws, that was enough for me to mean that I would have to follow it, all the examples. So again, my personal opinion on it is irrelevant. It got passed, I would have to follow it, and I'm happy to do that.
But I think it does still influence people's vote, your personal opinion. And what is your personal opinion?
It's split. Again, I am okay for people to sort of define their own oppression, and I'm happy if Jewish people at Warwick feel the IHRA represents that for them. I don't want to be the voice to stop them from saying that. So that is my opinion. Let them define their own form of oppression and follow what they say, rather than me inputting how I would feel about it.
I mean, it's not a ringing endorsement, is it, of the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance definition of anti-Semitism? Charlton, let's hear your thoughts on this.
Yeah, absolutely. Personally, I completely agree with the IHRA definition, and I'm glad the students agree. Yes, so I would personally definitely adopt it. I think the SU's handled this really badly in trying to just basically silence the Jewish Society. And actually, I'm quite glad, whatever your motives, I'm quite glad. I think this is the only full-time officer race where all candidates did, at least from the Jewish Society's own list, endorse the IHRA definition.
Okay, let's talk about campaigns, because we've spoken a lot in the past 25 minutes about welfare, and obviously that's a big part of the role, but it is the welfare and campaigns officer. So I'd like to hear your top priority campaigns that you'd like to enact throughout your year as welfare and campaigns officer. Charlton, to you first. What's your number one priority when it comes to campaigns?
God, it's hard to say number one. I think probably bringing back work accommodation. It all ties into each other, really. But bringing back work accommodation, because another campaign against, as I said, is against exploitative landlords. I think bringing back work accommodation is a great way of looking after the welfare and actually looking after the interests of students off campus. And I think it's absolutely terrible that the university decided to pull that.
Okay, Sebastian, just a response to Charlton's views on work accommodation there, and then I'll ask you what your top priority is.
I think work accommodation, although I like the idea, the whole reason it was cut is because it was losing a lot of money. There were a lot of spaces that students weren't taking up, so it just became a model that wasn't working anymore. I would be 100% for bringing up a new form of work accommodation where Warwick sort of managed accommodation around the campus, but not exactly how it was before, because it obviously wasn't working. So I would change it rather than just bring back the same old one.
I think this is what I mean when I talk about the university not cutting services after COVID. So work accommodation is brilliant. I don't think anyone that's actually lived in a work accommodation house has complained about it. And I think it wasn't very well promoted. It should have been promoted better. And if we were to bring it back, I think we should promote it better. And so, yeah, it might have been losing money, but this doesn't mean we should just cut the corner, because it's a brilliant service to students, and it's not all about money, I shouldn't have to say.
Well, I did actually live in work accommodation in my second year, and it wasn't, that amazing. It took a lot.
Were you in Coventry?
Yeah, it took a lot of time to get things fixed. It didn't seem to be that amazing. So again, I would bring it back, but change it. Obviously, money is not the most important thing, but if something's consistently losing money, then it doesn't seem to make sense to me.
I think here the reason why Warwick accommodation is popular among those who use it, and I've lived in Warwick and I've lived in private accommodation as well, is that the fees aren't involved. Is that you pay your rent and everything is done through the university, but you haven't got your deposits, you haven't got your holding fees and things like that. So I suppose really that's why it's so important to people.
Yeah, definitely. As you said, it's often cheaper. There's no deposit. It's guaranteed most of the time, I think, not to be that bad. Well, you don't get any of this with private landlords. You know, I think it's quite incredible that the university leaves students, you know, in this situation basically where they just kind of are at the whim of landlords, basically. And anyone, you know, in Leamington, I don't know what it's like in Coventry, but Tara and Co and things, for example, in Leamington, I think it's incredible the university leaves us like this.
Okay, well, that particular company you mentioned isn't here to defend themselves. Charlton, have you lived in Warwick accommodation properties before, just out of interest?
No, I haven't actually. I very much wanted to in my second year, but God, I remember it was a complete drama of whether we were living in Coventry or Leamington. In the end, we left it, I think, a bit too late and just ended up getting quite a bad house in Leamington, actually.
Yeah, it's not housing if there isn't a drama. Okay, so Charlton, that's the top campaign priority that you've told us. Sebastian, what's your number one priority?
Well, I have one for housing, but it would be creating a list of trusted landlords, a list of trusted electricity suppliers, trusted gas suppliers. I know so many students who have gone with certain companies to be completely scammed. So giving students a list of places that they can trust, that they know they can trust, would go a long way helping. There are other campaigns I'd like to run as well, but you did say and you mentioned one, so I'm not going to take up too much time.
Charlton, any response to that policy?
It's not a terrible idea. But I'm not sure it's that needed. Perhaps maybe more for international students and things it could be useful. But I certainly don't think it's as big a priority as things like work accommodation.
Sure, I'm going to give you both an opportunity to mention one more campaign because you know you can do more than one over the course of the year. So Seb, you indicated that you've got some more.
Yeah, so on my manifesto, the second point is saying that I would want to sort of help promote student-created online blogs. I mentioned a couple. There's one which is called the Anti-Racist Reading Club. And they create these community spaces, these safe community spaces for marginalised voices where you can learn and discuss with other people some of the social issues that the UK face. So working with them, promoting them through the SU, giving them space to work at university, I think would be really amazing because we're giving students then a place to go, a place where they can feel safe and they can learn.
Charlton, and I don't know if you've got any response to that, but additionally, what's your sort of next priority?
Right, so my campaigns, I want them all to be concrete, actually, you know, things that if passed will really help students in real concrete ways. So apart from bringing back Warwick accommodation and campaigning against exploitative landlords, I want to try and bring back eating at Warwick because I think it was a brilliant scheme. I'm particularly using it first year, but also in second year a lot. It saved me a lot of money. I want to campaign to increase the wages for students and workplace rights for those students working on campus or in the SU. I want campus to be more accessible and friendly, particularly for disabled students. So as I said, I'm the treasurer for Work Enable, and this has been a big problem of ours, a big fight of ours, and it's something I want to continue if I'm elected. I also want, as we reopen from COVID, I say not cutting corners. I actually think we need more interesting events and entertainment from the SU, particularly perhaps working with societies to boost some of their best events. I also want to push for departments to treat student welfare on the same level as education.
Okay. I'm aware I've let Charlton there list many policies rather than one. So Sebastian, it's only fair for me to come back to you and give you the chance to outline any more policies that you'd like to mention.
So yeah, there is obviously eating at Warwick, which was disbanded. I think it was just because the contract had ended. So bringing that back, but making it probably more efficient. I know that it didn't work at Roots, so you couldn't get a discount at Roots. So maybe bringing it so you could have it at Roots.
I remember you could. I think it was only. I think when you used it, like when you were paying for yourself, you couldn't. But if you brought to the tills, you could use it.
I'm pretty sure the way it stands is that you can pay by it, but you're not necessarily getting a discount for eating at Warwick. But let's not interrupt it.
So yeah, so I would want to bring back eating at Warwick. I do think it saves a lot of money. Obviously, campaigns around sexual harassment, but we've already talked about that. Working with the liberation officers to help them with their campaigns would be a big thing that I would want to do. They're elected, obviously, by the students that they're meant to represent. So working with them to help them with their campaigns would be a big thing that I would want to do as well.
Okay, well, we seem to have covered quite a lot of ground in our 35 minutes together this afternoon. I appreciate you both speaking to me. Best of luck with your campaigns. Final couple of days now. Cheers.
Cheers. Thank you.
Thank you.
So that's Charlton and Sayer, both running to be the next Welfare and Campaigns Officer at the University of Warwick Students' Union. You can have your say by voting at warwicksu.com/votes. The vote closes at 7 p.m. on Friday. Fill out our exit poll on our social media pages and in the link to this once you've done that, so we can get a better idea of how you've voted. And then join us on Friday night for the results show live on Raw 12:51 a.m. social media pages. That's all for now. See you soon.